Surely, many of us have heard Disney stories before, haven't we? But did you know that some of them are based on real stories? Today, I'll tell you some facts about the origins that might surprise you about the princesses or Disney characters you've known. What if I told you that Disney has actually deceived us for so long? Well, not really. They've actually altered much of the story content to be suitable for children because the original stories could be much bloodier and scarier. The first story we're all familiar with is undoubtedly Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. In 1937, the film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was released, and it truly made a huge impact. It also paved the way for numerous Disney stories about princes and princesses in the future. We're all familiar with the beautiful Snow White, who has to live with a wicked stepmother. She even orders a huntsman to kill Snow White so she can become the fairest in the land. But the kind huntsman doesn't do it. He lets Snow White flee into the forest, where she later lives with the seven dwarfs. When the wicked stepmother discovers Snow White is still alive, she attempts to harm her once again by giving her a poisoned apple. After taking a bite, Snow White falls into a deep sleep until she receives a kiss from the prince. She wakes up, and they live happily ever after. We've all heard the story like this when we were young, but the original version of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs has a slightly bloodier ending. The original was written by the Brothers Grimm in 1812 and first published in German. It's quite similar to Disney's version until Snow White bites into the poisoned apple. In fact, the prince did not kiss her but rather instructed his servants to carry her coffin back to the castle. While passing through the forest, one of the attendants stumbled over a tree branch, causing Snow White's coffin to fall. Her body was jolted, dislodging the piece of apple from her throat, and she came back to life. Now, we come to the darkest part of the story. Upon returning to the castle, the king organized a grand wedding for them, and of course, neighboring kings and queens were invited to attend, including Snow White's stepmother, the one who had previously used countless schemes to harm her. When she arrived without knowing that the bride was Snow White, stepmother was immediately seized and forced to put on a pair of red-hot iron shoes. Stepmother was made to dance in those shoes until she died, and that was Snow White's revenge upon her. This ending sparked intense controversy before Disney acquired it for adaptation into a film because it was clearly not suitable for children. That's also why Disney chose not to include this ending in the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs movie. In the second story, in 2010, Disney released a film about a young princess named Rapunzel, who had the ability to heal wounds with magic. Unfortunately, this princess was kidnapped by a witch named Gothel and imprisoned in a tall tower deep in the forest. As she grew older, Rapunzel's golden hair grew longer, containing magical energy. The princess also began to yearn to explore the outside world, especially the mysterious lights she saw in the sky every year. Later, she befriended a thief who helped her escape from the Forbidden Tower. Rapunzel discovered that the lights in the sky were lanterns released by her biological parents every year on her birthday. After cutting her hair and facing numerous challenges with the young man, she finally reunited with her biological parents. They lived happily ever after. However, the original version of Rapunzel's story had a much darker ending, quite terrifying indeed. The story began with a poor couple living next to the house of a witch named Gothel. It would have been unremarkable if one day the pregnant wife did not demand that her husband steal a flower from the witch's garden. And of course afterwards the husband was captured by the witch, and she agreed to spare his life on the condition that they must give their child to her as soon as it was born. And that child was Rapunzel, a girl raised by a wicked witch. Rapunzel grew up with long golden hair, and when she turned 12, the witch locked her in a tall tower deep in the forest. One day, a prince came upon hearing her singing, and naturally, they fell in love. They planned to escape to have a dream wedding. However, the witch Gothel knew everything. She was furious, cut off Rapunzel's hair, and banished her into the forest. Then she used Rapunzel's hair to lure the prince up to the top of the tower, until he reached there and was told that Rapunzel had run away alone, causing him so much pain that he collapsed and decided to commit suicide by jumping from the tall tower to the ground. Fortunately, the prince survived, but he was blinded. He wandered in the forest until he heard Rapunzel singing again. They met, and she healed his eyes. When the witch realized that the two had reunited, she was so angry that she let Rapunzel's hair drop down to the ground and got stuck on the tall tower until she starved to death. Although the original storyline is still quite good and fulfilling, nonetheless, its details are not suitable for children. Pinocchio is considered one of Disney's most valuable films, premiered in 1940, The life of the wooden boy Pinocchio is recounted through the narration of the Cricket Jiminy. It tells the story of an old woodcarver named Geppetto who created a puppet and then named it Pinocchio because he was so lonely that he secretly wished Pinocchio was a real boy. One night he made that wish upon a shooting star. And the next morning, the wish came true. One day, while on his way to school, Pinocchio was lured into joining a circus to perform with other puppets, but more accurately, he was kidnapped at that time. He was then rescued by a fairy, but in return, every time he told a lie, his nose would grow longer. Pinocchio and Cricket Jiminy eventually made their way back home, only to find out that Geppetto, his father, had set sail to find Pinocchio and had ultimately been swallowed by a whale. The wooden boy then managed to save his father, but drowned in the process. Once again, when Pinocchio was rescued by the fairy, this time she turned him into a real boy. From then on, Pinocchio and the old man lived happily ever after. The classic work, The Adventures of Pinocchio, was written by Carlo Collodi, but its original content is much darker. Pinocchio in the original story is described as a miserable and mischievous boy. He even mocks and steals the wig of the person who created him, and Jiminy Cricket is actually a bad friend, always urging Pinocchio to disobey his father. The wooden boy then used a hammer to crush Jiminy Cricket to death. The subsequent events of the story involve Pinocchio being repeatedly kidnapped, starved, and tortured. His wooden legs even got half burned. In general, the author of the story said that Pinocchio is a typical example of disobedient children, and Pinocchio in the story does not have a happy ending. In the end, he was hanged in a corner of an oak tree in the deep forest forever. The last character I want to mention in today's video is Winnie the Pooh, because I myself quite like this adorable character, so I was quite shocked when I learned the truth behind it. Winnie the Pooh is a cute bear created by a British writer named A.A. Milne. Later, Disney based on it to create short films about Winnie the Pooh and his friends in the forest. In the film, there is only one human character. Christopher Robin is human. Winnie the Pooh and his friends have had adventures in the forest, and we cannot deny that it is very adorable. But you might be surprised to know that some characters in the story are based on real-life characters. In 1925, a bear was sent to the London Zoo because its owner, as a soldier, had to go to the front lines. One day, A.A. Milne took his son to the zoo to play, and his son's name was Christopher Robin Milne. When they arrived, Christopher seemed to immediately love this bear and named it Winnie the Pooh. That was the inspiration for A.A. Milne to create the character of Winnie the Pooh, the golden bear in the red sweater, playing with his little owner Christopher Robin. However, beyond the cuteness that the film brings, viewers have raised countless hypotheses about the true personalities of the characters in Winnie the Pooh. After researching, I was also very surprised and even wished I had never read it, but since I know it, you should know it too. It is said that these characters are actually facing mental disorders, and here are their profiles. I'll just give a few examples. Firstly, Winnie the Pooh is actually suffering from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, characterized by carelessness, dreaminess, a disregard for danger, and a desire to break all rules. Secondly, Piglet is believed to have an anxiety disorder and insecurity, leading to stuttering. Thirdly, Eeyore the donkey is an abandoned character, always viewing everything negatively and seemingly unable to find any joy in life. Eeyore is actually suffering from severe depression. And finally, the key character is Christopher Robin, who is said to have delusional disorder and has imagined everything. The natural life and playing with wild animals are never real. All of those things have never been confirmed by the author of the story, is A.A. Milne. Therefore, I still think it's all nonsense, and viewers are just overthinking. That's the end of today's video. If you want me to do more on any topic, please leave your comments below. And this is Creep Factor. Thank you for taking the time to watch the entire video, and if you like this video, please click like, share and subscribe to the channel for more interesting contents.